What if our local universe began to exist and has a cause for its existence, has a reason, an explanation for its existence, that isn't actually an agent, a thinking being? What if it is a natural explanation, and natural in the sense of it is a part of the cosmos, but not necessarily a thinking agent putting forth some sort of creative effort? The truth is, we don't know why there's something instead of nothing. There are a number of people who would tell you that it's because nothing is intrinsically unstable, and therefore something is going to emerge from nothing. But we don't have an understanding of a mechanism. And since we can't explore beyond the origins of our universe, we can only hypothesize. And if that's the case, how do we determine that the foundational, essential explanation for our universe is that it is a contingent entity that is derived from a thinking agent? I see absolutely no justification for this, definitely not within the arguments. And this is one of the things that needs to start happening. If you're going to present an argument, when you offer up your premises, you need to offer reasons for those premises. You may have to add additional arguments to it, and that doesn't always happen. This shorthand version of the argument from contingency, both of the versions we've looked at today, have this bald assertion in there. If the universe has a reason for its existence, then that reason is God. Now, I know, because I've studied this, that they think they have reasons for it. They will say, oh, well, it has to be something that's non-contingent, that serves as the origin of our universe, and it has to have these particular qualities. It has to be capable of creating a universe. It has to be capable of causing a universe to exist, and it goes on and on and on. And it's then their conclusion is that the God hypothesis is the only thing that we know of that fits those criteria. The problem here is the God hypothesis is not something we know of, and these arguments are relying on a long history of mankind inventing deities, inventing ideas that are sufficient to explain what the unknown, but they aren't necessarily necessary to explain the unknown. So if you live in a culture that has been taught from birth that, yep, there's a God, if you live in a culture where even individuals who weren't raised to believe in a God are still familiar with this concept of an all-powerful divine being that is not bound by space and time, that exists eternally, then it will seem reasonable to say that, given the unknown origin of the universe, given the unknown causal foundation for the universe, upon which our universe is contingent, the only entity that we're aware of that could possibly do this is a God. It had to be thinking, it had to be intentional, it couldn't just be an accident. All of these things are preying upon our intuitions. We don't want the existence of everything to have been an accident. And by the way the universe progresses from its beginning to where I am now, sitting in my backyard on a swing, is not just a series of accidents. There is order in the universe. There are physical laws that must be obeyed. And this is why there's so much confusion about the process of evolution by natural selection. People want to just say, oh, you just think it was all an accident that did it. No, it may have been an accident that perhaps started the fire, but it's not an accident that the fire then followed the path of burnt grass or dry grass and stayed away from the water, because fire doesn't actually consume water like that.
Okay, lots of interesting stuff here, Josh. You want to start us off?
Yeah, I was almost going to start banging my head on the table when he said, again, that those scholars don't seem to support any form of solving the gap problem, because they definitely do. So, but we've already discussed that. So I think just something as a commentary note, his idea of intuitions is very similar to kind of our understanding of a custom, or Hume's using of a custom. It's kind of like, well, we have these intuitions of a certain concept, but while we don't exactly have direct evidence of said concept, we just seem to kind of gotten this kind of concept of God as kind of this kind of traditional thing, or this cultural thing which was passed down the generations. But I really think that this raises a very interesting question. Well, where exactly did we get the concept of God from? Because in the past, a lot of people like to say, well, we just got it by timesing man by infinity. But I don't necessarily think that that's even possible. Like, imagine a human, right? And then you times them by infinity. Do you necessarily get God? I mean, the first question you have to ask is, well, how exactly are you timesing man by infinity? Which order of infinity are you timesing man by? It's not necessarily clear. And of course, this is more of the Feuerbachian or the Humean kind of approach to how man created the concept of God. But it's not necessarily clear that man can create God ex nihilo. And it seems more probable, at least to me, that our concept of God actually points to a God. And I'm not going to develop this argument much further here, because that's not the point of the video. But it's just something to think about. Where on earth do we get this concept of God from? It doesn't seem explicitly obvious that man could, or that they did indeed create it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And you can just run like a Bayesian argument where it's like the probability of believing God exists is more likely if God exists than if God doesn't exist. So the belief that God exists would be some evidence in favor of the existence of God. He brings some interesting points. Like, I don't know, I was just like writing some notes. He's like the idea of like the foundation, like something, I don't know if he brings up this supernatural natural thing a little bit here. And it's like, I don't really know what that means. Like to me, that's kind of like it's just weird because everyone defines that differently. But I mean, like I'm just thinking about like what do Matt and I agree on? So we agree, like it seems like we agree that there's some sort of like foundation. Like he's gonna say maybe it's the cosmos. I'm gonna say it's like God. It seems like we both accept the PSR. I'm sure we both accept minds exist. Obviously, I believe Matt's a physicalist. So he's gonna say consciousness reduces to brain states, and I'm gonna obviously deny that. And we both believe that like matter exists. So like there is some sort of common agreement, and what we disagree on is really just like what the foundation is. I'm going to say the foundation's a mind, in one sense, in kind of like ours, in the sense that God is also conscious, but like obviously God's going to be radically different, like a perfect mind. And Matt's going to say, well, it's probably not that. It's probably something material. So it seems like that's like our big disagreement. So I think we're a lot closer than we think we are. So really the question then, at least in my mind, is like what's more likely is like, is it the personal coming from the impersonal or the impersonal coming from the personal? So it's just interesting. I don't know. It's just, I feel like, yeah, I don't want to say anything else.
I think the gap problem, the idea or the kind of the personal and the impersonal is just something very interesting. And that's something which William Lane Craig touched upon actually in his discussion with Alex O'Connor. Something goes along this lines is that imagine there's nothing, right? And then he, of course, Matt said like, well, some people view nothing as something which is intrinsically unstable. Then, of course, that raises a problem. How on earth did you attribute a property to nothingness? You normally have a property or a predicate attached to a subject, and that subject is nothing. Then how on earth did you get a predicate to attach to it? But leaving that aside, you're kind of this idea of, well, you have nothing, and assuming you had this eternity of nothingness, or at least physical nothingness. What exactly made a state of physical nothingness go to something? Because if it was a physical property, or it was a natural, or something which was not with free will, or something which is not personal, then well, there doesn't seem to be anything which could possibly make that thing arbitrarily suddenly lead to cause an action or actualize the universe, because everything we see in reality, or everything we see which could cause something, normally are able to cause it due to an intrinsic possibility or intrinsic kind of nature to it. But then, first of all, you have nothingness, so you don't seem to have any functions to create universes from it. But number two, what seems to be the case is, well, why didn't that do it any time before or any time after? Because, well, what exactly prompted this non-personal, non-natural thing to be able to cause the universe in the first place? The fact that it could cause the universe in the first place seems to suggest that it was indeed a personal agent with free will. And that's just something to perhaps think about a bit here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting to think about it, because like I think a lot of times like theists and atheists have a lot more in common than we think. And I think about like this Matt video, like we agree there's a foundation, and like obviously I'm gonna think it's a mind, he's gonna think it's probably something material. But there's a lot more agreement than we appear. Do you have anything else you want to add before we get into this next clip?
Oh, just to say a quick thing, when I'm using this timey language, I'm using it mainly just for the sake of simplicity. No, I'm not thinking too much about exactly how to phrase it. My brain's kind of dead by now to kind of exactly say, oh, this was this state, like, I don't know how you're even going to raise it, but it's just I'm using these kind of time phrases just as kind of an easy way to kind of just conceptualize it a bit.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff.